Hello, everyone. My name is Adele Hite. I'm a registered dietitian with a background in public health and in nutritional epidemiology. I also have my PhD in rhetoric and communication. And I've been in and around the new therapeutic carbohydrate restriction or reduction landscape for a number of years. I worked with Eric Westman back in 2006 when he opened up his lifestyle medicine clinic at Duke. And I've gotten to see some wonderful ways that it's been changing. But despite the breakthroughs that we've had in the past few years, type 2 diabetes continues to be treated as if it's an inevitably progressive condition that must be managed with ever-increasing amounts of medication, which tends to lead to ever-increasing complications, blindness, kidney failure, and amputation. And as more and more people across the globe are faced with a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, of prediabetes, of metabolic syndrome, which has a high risk of heart disease and type 2 diabetes, there has been no organization devoted to ensuring that these individuals would be given the opportunity to reverse their conditions through diet and lifestyle changes. Until now. In this presentation, I have the honor of being able to introduce to you the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners and the places that we can go together. So first of all, what is SMHP? Who is it for? What does it do? And how is it different from other advocacy organizations associated with low carb that have come before? What can we do that's different? Well, I think there are three main things. One is to strengthen the standard of care around therapeutic carbohydrate reduction. Another is to shift the diet wars dynamic, that whole calories in, calories out versus carbohydrate reduction, low fat versus low carb. I think we can begin to change this my diet's bigger than your diet mentality. And I also think that we can dramatically change healthcare. Now that sounds like a tall order, but if you hear how SMHP is truly different and how our approach is different than what has gone before, maybe this is something that we can accomplish. So what is SMHP? It's a non-profit organization with charitable 501c3 status. So what does that mean? It means that it is an incorporated organization, so it can act as a business, but it can take in funds that are tax deductible. So it can accept donations, and these donations can be tax deductible. And what this means is that we, as an organization, as a group, can fundraise for projects that can help us meet our goals. So who are the people that SMHP represents and speaks for and gathers around? All researchers and practitioners working to improve metabolic health. So this is a big tent, and researchers and practitioners are terms that can be thought of in broad terms. So this includes clinicians, this includes scientists, but it also includes citizen scientists. It also includes ambassadors for this way of thinking about health, coaches, trainers, any affiliated healthcare professionals. And what is it that we do? Well, any nonprofit organization, typically their first purpose or their first activity is to educate. And with SMHP, in that we include training these clinicians and these allied professionals. And for us, this also includes supporting evidence-based nutritional therapeutic options. In particular, therapeutic carbohydrate reduction, but any therapeutic option that is evidence-based falls under the umbrella of SMHP. And note these two words, therapeutic. So this is different from public health, preventive ideas, and that these are options. So that points to a patient-centered approach, and I'm going to talk about those more in a little bit. So what do we expect to accomplish with these, this purpose and this mission? Well, we expect to help improve metabolic health across the globe for the whole world. So to sum this up, SMHP's purpose is to represent all researchers and practitioners working to improve metabolic health, and I'll talk more about what that means, around the world through education, training, and support of evidence-based nutritional approaches, including carbohydrate restriction, but not limited to carbohydrate restriction, as a valid therapeutic option or intervention. Now, we were asked when we introduced SMHP, is this just Low Carb USA rebranded? And that's a valid question. Are we just shifting to a nonprofit, tax-deductible charitable organization, but basically pursuing the same agenda? And I would say vehemently, no. It is part of our mission to restore carbohydrate reduction to its rightful place as a dietary intervention option, but we don't champion carbohydrate reduction because we think there's one diet to rule them all. We champion it because it's been overlooked, ignored, dismissed, reviled even. And those of us who have worked with therapeutic carbohydrate restriction and reduction know that this is a very useful intervention that can really help people avoid medication and complications. And we want to restore it to its rightful place. So as one of our first purposes, we want to strengthen the standard of care around therapeutic carbohydrate reduction. And as I said, we also want to shift the diet wars dynamic. We also want to dramatically change healthcare. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to strengthen the standard of care around therapeutic carbohydrate reduction by supporting the development of evidence-based clinical protocols for TCR for specific conditions. Now, we've already created what we call a general protocol, and that lays down the basics of therapeutic carbohydrate reduction and what, who it's appropriate for and how it can be administered. But it's just a general protocol. It's not specific to any particular condition. And what we'd like to do as an organization is to create what Doug calls addendum to our general protocol to show how you can take this general protocol and apply it to specific conditions for which evidence exists for treating specific populations. And this is all a part of creating a standard of care around those treatments. Some of the things that we want to do, for instance, are type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes. One that was raised just recently in our town hall was conditions related to eyesight. And all of those things can become a part of creating a standard of care around therapeutic carbohydrate reduction for these specific conditions. But to do this, we need to create a network of clinicians and non-clinician ambassadors who use these protocols. So a standard of care is not a protocol. It's not a document. It's not a list of do this and then do this and do this. Standard of care is what is practiced out there in the world by a group of professionals who are trained in a similar manner and are treating a similar population. So if you have clinicians who are trained by SMHP and who are following a protocol that SMHP has worked to put together, and they are treating a specific population, say people with type 2 diabetes, that practice from that group of people, that's the standard of care, not the protocol, not the training, not the professionals, but that practice working in real life is the standard of care. And what does a standard of care do for us? Well, for this network of clinicians and ambassadors, what it does is create that safety net. So you can't be called out for practicing outside of a standard of care if you are part of a community of practitioners who follow a standard of care. And so that's what we are working to do. And in that regard, another way that we're going to strengthen the standard of care around TCR is to provide one voice for metabolic health rather than scattered factions that are promoting a variety of dietary approaches. And by that, I mean within the therapeutic carbohydrate reduction community, there are a lot of different ways to go about this. And creating a standard of care doesn't mean that we all do everything exactly the same way. We know that some practitioners don't care if their patients or their clients use artificial sweeteners, and other clinicians do. And they think that that's a bad idea, and that it gets in the way of progress, and that it can prevent them successfully meeting their health goals. But what we can do as an organization is come together and identify what we agree on and identify what we agree to disagree on. And as I've said many times before, agreement to disagree is consensus. And that helps us create one voice. And that one voice allows us to work together. And that one voice is for metabolic health. Now, although we are lifting up and we're championing therapeutic carbohydrate reduction, our ultimate goal is to promote metabolic health. And you're going to hear me emphasize that over and over again in this talk, because it's really important to understand the differences between those things. Promoting metabolic health is going to help us shift the diet wars dynamic. First of all, it's a focus on clinical encounters rather than public health. So this is not an approach that is a one-size-fits-all, top-down population intervention. That's not us. There are other organizations that do that work, but we don't. As if you've ever listened to me, you would know that I think that the DGAs are a bad idea no matter what kind of diet they promote. And they're a bad idea not because of the diet that they contain, but they're a bad idea because of what top-down, one-size-fits-all interventions do, which is, first of all, they lead to diet wars. My diet's better than yours. But also the DGA are meant for healthy people and healthy people. And they're not meant for clinicians to be using to treat people, although that is how they got used, and that's one of the problems with them. So as we champion metabolic health, we're focusing on clinical encounters. We're focusing on that one-to-one relationship that you have with a client or a patient. We're not focusing on creating a one-size-fits-all top-down option. And that's part of shifting that diet wars dynamic. We're not trying to take on that burden. Why? Well, first of all, we don't have that evidence. Now, we know the dietary guidelines don't have that evidence, but we don't either. We don't have the evidence to insist that we know for any given individual who is otherwise healthy in what they can do, eat, or lifestyle intervention to prevent every chronic disease that they could possibly get. We don't have that evidence. The dietary guidelines don't have that evidence. But what we do have the evidence to do is to reverse or help ameliorate diagnosed conditions, including preventing advancement of a pre-disease state such as prediabetes or hypertension. And we do have the evidence to improve the health markers associated with the high risk of developing a chronic disease, such as the risk factors in metabolic syndrome. And that's why our focus is on metabolic health. So in other words, we're advocating for an outcome. We're not dictating how to get there. Any paths that lead to metabolic health are good paths. For any given individual, we don't have the right answer for what that path is going to be for them. And so we can shift the diet wars dynamic by promoting individualized approaches to metabolic health. This gets us out of that I'm right, you're wrong, back and forth. There's one way, it's my way or the highway. That's not what we're doing. If there's biochemical individuality, if we're all different, if there's different ways to get to metabolic health for each individual, then there isn't just one way. And we can't dictate one right way for everyone. By shifting the diet wars dynamic and not setting up this antagonistic relationship with other groups who may think differently about approaches to metabolic health, we can reach out to these other organizations and create alliances and work together to change the health of the world, which we can't do if we're in that diet wars dynamic where our way is better than your way and you're wrong because we're right. So we know that we don't all get to metabolic health the same way, so that we can be open to finding other organizations to work with who have the similar goals that we do. And under our next way that we're different, the big dream that I have, dramatically changing healthcare, that becomes very important. So if we are going to change healthcare, and I know a lot of you are out there thinking it's not really healthcare, it's sick care, and that's true. If we're going to change healthcare, we're going to do it through providing education about regaining or maintaining metabolic health through food and lifestyle. Now, maintaining metabolic health is not the same thing as preventing chronic disease. Preventing chronic disease is what public health dietary guides thinks that it can do. It doesn't have the evidence to actually say that it can do it, and neither do we. But we do know that we can help people maintain metabolic health through food and lifestyle, and we can do that because we're going to be the ones who define metabolic health. That's right, that's going to be us. So here's what I've been working on. What is metabolic health? That's a question mark back there. And we've come up with a few criteria, things like normal blood sugar, normal blood pressure, normal cholesterol and triglycerides without medication. Having minimal belly fat, that's the visceral fat, abdominal fat issue that indicates poor metabolic health. And then I have Dr. Ben to thank for this fifth one, which I was really struggling with, which is a body composition that lets you be strong and active. Strong muscles, strong bones, healthy joints, and body fat that's right for you. So notice that nowhere in here it says a healthy BMI or below a certain weight. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute too. But we want people to be healthy at the weight that's right for them, but we want their insides to be healthy so that they can be strong and they can be active and not be on medication. And we can help them do that. Now, as I said, this is a draft. Anybody has ideas for me, please be in touch and help me work this out. Because what we need to do with this idea of metabolic health is we need to educate people. Right now, people are not focused on metabolic health. They don't know what that means. Nobody Googles that. People are busy Googling how to lose weight or keto diet or things like that. But the real idea is to have metabolic health so that you're not on medications and so that you can live an active and vital life. So who do we need to educate about this? Importantly, we need to educate the public first. They need to know what metabolic health is and they need to want it, and we can do that. We also need to educate practitioners who are unaware that there are diet and lifestyle approaches to metabolic health. Remember that practitioners nowadays in our sick care system, they see people when they've lost their metabolic health. And instead of helping them regain it, they get on medication to treat the symptoms. And so we can change that by educating these practitioners that you don't just have to medicate people. You don't just have to intervene with surgeries or with pharmaceuticals, that you can help them take up diet and lifestyle approaches. It's not unheard of. It's not impossible. It's not unsustainable that people can and do succeed at this. And then, of course, we want to educate the people who already know that there are diet and lifestyle approaches to metabolic health, but want to further their knowledge. They want to increase their knowledge. They want to get better at it. And we can always get better at what we do. So another way that we can dramatically change healthcare with our focus on metabolic health is by emphasizing patient-centered practices and shared decision-making. And this comes back to the idea that we fit the diet and lifestyle intervention to the individual and their goals of care, not to what we think is best for them, not what we prefer, not what worked for us. This isn't about ideology. It's not about, it's not a religious stance. It's about the patient and what they want to do and what they can accomplish. And we want to be able to offer them options, that their metabolic health plan is one that they agree to try and want to work on. This way they can't fail. Maybe they don't do everything the way that you help them learn, but do they start to move towards metabolic health? Well, those steps you get to build on as a practitioner by emphasizing that this is about them and what they want, not something that you want to force on them. So it's not like writing a prescription. And my little soapbox is, food is not medicine. Everybody needs food, right? Not just sick people. And you can see on the table in front of this poor gentleman here, that's not food, that's medicine. Medicine is for sick people. But yes, food can transform people who are suffering from poor health. But food is more than that. Food is about culture. It's about our life. It's about our preferences. It's about how things fit into our day. And so you can't just write a prescription for food, because food is more than that. And so this brings us to the next way that we can dramatically change healthcare, which is by strengthening team-based approaches to metabolic health. To have people focus on diet and lifestyle changes, you can't do it alone as a clinician, as a provider. You need a team-based approach. You need everybody. You need the person with the green eggs and the ham, and you need the person who is going to help them adjust their medications. And you need the person who's going to talk to them about their diet, and you need the trainer. You need everybody who's part of that team. We know that physicians don't have a lot of time to spend with patients, but dietitians have a little more time. And diabetes educators have a little more time. But we've been very siloed in our practices, and we've been very skeptical of other people. Oh, those dietitians, they don't understand carbohydrate reduction. They're against it. They don't understand that saturated fat is okay. Whoa. We need to reach out. We need to learn that we're not going to succeed in helping people adopt diet and lifestyle changes if they don't get the appropriate kind of support. And again, on my little soapbox for a minute, dietitians are the ones who are going to be able to help you translate your prescription into sustainable changes that somebody can make at the dinner table. That's what dietitians are taught to do. I speak as a dietitian. So by doing that, by taking a team-based approach, we're allowing for success for our patients and our clients. We're also allowing for success for our approach, therapeutic carbohydrate reduction, and working towards metabolic health. We can help people succeed doing those things, but only if we all work together. By focusing on metabolic health and not weight or BMI is another way that we can dramatically change healthcare. Nowadays, when we want people to get healthier, we want them to lose weight. And that's the only path that we're offering them, is to lose weight. Well, we know from the work of Jeff Volek and others that people can regain their metabolic health before they lose an appreciable amount of weight. And in fact, many of you already know that it is the regaining of metabolic health that allows people to lose weight in many instances. But that, it's that focus that puts the responsibility back on us as a team of providers, rather than on that individual to eat the right way and to exercise the way that we tell them to, so that their body conforms to some standard that we've designated, rather than helping them to fix the problems that are going on inside that are causing them to gain weight, to eat more, to hold on to adipose tissue, and to have the metabolic dysregulation that we're then seeing. So by focusing on metabolic health and not weight or BMI, we're giving people another chance to be successful at having health. And what that does in the end is offer hope instead of medications and complications. When you tell someone who has been overweight or obese for much of their lives that the only way that they can be healthy is to lose weight, you may be taking away that person's ability to be hopeful for a healthy future. If they think that the only way to regain health is to eat in a way that they don't enjoy, to do exercise that isn't comfortable for their bodies, to take a medication or to have an operation, you're not giving them hope. But if we let people know that the target is not your body size, the target is changing the way that your body works on the inside, and you can do that through diet, and you can do that through lifestyle changes without necessarily having to lose weight first, then we're offering them hope. This also applies to people with type 2 diabetes. If you're given a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes and you're told that it's a chronic, progressive, debilitating disease with horrible complications that many people end up with, you're taking away their hope. But if you let them know that there are changes that they can make with diet and lifestyle, you give them back that hope. And right now it seems like in our world, certainly in my world, hope is in short supply. And any way that we can offer hope to our clinician, to our patients, and to our clients, that we want to be able to do that. Imagine a healthcare system based on hope. And I always think of the Unwins and their grin paradigm. If you don't know it, go and Google it. But hope is healing. And by focusing on metabolic health, by focusing on diet and lifestyle changes instead of medications and complications and progressive debilitating disease, we can offer people hope. So those are big targets to aim at. I don't think they're unrealistic at all, because I think that Doug and his board have put together an organization that will give us the framework, will give us the foundation that we need to get where we want to go. But maybe looking through the telescope, there are other places that we can go in the future. For instance, research with standardized protocols, with a network of clinicians and allied healthcare providers who practice in the same way. Can we aggregate data? Can we collect information and use it to help answer some of these questions that we can't answer right now? Who does best with what kind of carbohydrate reduction? Are there people who do better reducing carbohydrates slowly rather than going from normal levels of carbohydrate to 20 grams a day or less? Are there people who really can't use artificial sweeteners because it stalls their progress? Are there other people who can? We don't know. We don't have the answers to these questions. Is there a way that we can begin to answer these questions through our networks, through our protocols, and research the answers to these questions so that we can do our jobs better in the future? And then there's, on a personal note, my dream. D is for dream, and I do have a dream, and I think that the Society for Metabolic Health Practitioners can make it come true. And I talk about this all the time, but it is something that I think about almost every day. My father was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes late in life. I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes many, many years earlier, and I didn't know that diabetes ran in my family because the other people who were diagnosed with it, who were my dad and my uncle, didn't get diagnosed until later in life. So my dad got diagnosed with frank diabetes when he was much older than I was when I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes. But when he got this diagnosis, his doctor, who was ancient, small town, North Carolina, gave him the option of either going on a medication, metformin, or reducing the sugars and starches in his diet and taking a few more laps around the high school track, which my dad was already doing, but he said, you could just do it some more, and that will help. And my dad thought about this for a while and went, reducing sugars and starches. I think that's what Adele does with up at Duke with Dr. Westman. I think they call that the no sugar, no starch diet. I bet she can help me with it. And of course I could. I gave him a glucometer. I gave him a couple of lessons in what carbohydrates do to your blood sugar. And what protein does and what fat does, and how to think about meals so that you can eat foods that don't promote high blood sugars. And my dad's an engineer, so he listened and he learned, and he took his glucometer, and I think it was like a pincushion those first couple of months. He just tested his blood all the time, figuring out what foods made his blood sugars go up and what foods didn't. And pretty soon, I called it a crappy low-carb diet. His crappy low-carb diet had his A1C level back to normal within a year, and he had no further progression of disease, no complications, and he was never on any diabetes medication, including metformin, for the rest of his life. And then when I came down to stay with my mother and father, as I did my my rotation at the hospital nearby, because they had to disperse us throughout the state. So I went down to my little southern town, and when I was there, one of the things that I did as an RD intern was to go to the diabetes wound clinic. And I would walk in there and I would see, you know, the people that my mom and dad lived with there in that little southern town, and they were losing their toes, their feet, sometimes their legs, because they didn't know what my dad knew, which is that you can take a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes and you can implement pretty easy diet and lifestyle interventions. And that chronic disease that you'll have until the day that you die, you have it maybe, but no one will ever know. So my father died of a brain tumor, and when he was in the hospital to have it biopsied, the doctors refused to give him a biopsy because they looked at his chart and they saw an old man who had uncontrolled diabetes, according to them, because he wasn't on medication. So his diabetes was uncontrolled because there was no medication. And they came rounding, and I said, take his blood sugar. And the nurse took his blood sugar, and she read it to the doctors. It was normal. And she said, well, I'm going to give him a shot of insulin because his breakfast is going to come. And he'll need that to, you know, keep his blood sugars down for breakfast. And I said, no, he won't. And the doctors looked at me like it's crazy. And his breakfast came in, bacon and eggs, not green eggs and ham, but bacon and eggs. And he ate it, and the nurse checked his blood sugar again, and it was still normal. And the doctors went out in the hall and conferred and came back in and decided they would go ahead with the biopsy. And I think they learned a thing or two that day. I hope so. But as I like to say, my dad, my sweet, wonderful father, died with all of his lovely toes. And so what I want, my dream is for SMHP, is to make high carbs and medications for type 2 diabetes to go away. If anybody doesn't know this Dr. Seuss story, will you please go now? I want them to disappear and never be heard of again. I want everybody to have the opportunity that I had, which is to watch their parents grow old, even if they have a diagnosis of diabetes, to grow old with all of their limbs intact, with their eyesight intact, with their kidneys intact. And it's not that big of a reach, and we can do it. So I have one last word before I go, or a few words, because this is me. Go back. If we want to get to these destinations, if we're gonna make my dream come true and make high carb diets and medication for type 2 diabetes go away, we are going to have to proceed with science and with diplomacy. We know from national nutrition policy that science isn't just science, it's politics. And if we've learned anything from 50 years of dietary guidelines that don't prevent chronic disease, and if we've learned anything from US politics from the last few weeks, it's that words matter. They really matter. We need to remember that as we move forward with this organization, that words matter. And we need to think of that as we choose our words that educate and inform the public and others outside of our low-carb bubble. All successful grassroots advocacy movements stand first and foremost on sound science. And so we have to do that. That's where we have to start. And after that, it's largely about rhetoric. It's about the words we use. We need to choose words with clear meanings rather than slogans. Whole foods, healthy foods. What do those mean? They mean different things to different people. And we need to be clear about what we mean. We need to choose words that are welcoming rather than exclusive. We believe this, not that. How much room is there for everybody under this tent? And we need to choose words that unite rather than divide. We are not here to tell people that they're wrong. We're here to show them other ways to be the clinicians, to be the providers, to be the practitioners that their patients and clients need and want them to be. And what that means is that we have to be sure when we step. We have to step with care and great tact. And we have to remember that life's a great balancing act. And we have to balance what we want and what we believe and what we think with what is going to allow us to open these doors to metabolic health for everyone, everywhere. Words matter. So to the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners and to all of you out there who I hope will join us in this ever, congratulations. Today is our day and we are off to great places. We are off and away. That's the end for me. Thank you so much. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me easily on Twitter. My email. I'm sure Doug will share that with you somewhere. And I'm looking forward to answering questions and getting to meet some of you all virtually in our Q&A after this. Thanks.
Draft of the metabolic health definition, Adele included normal cholesterol and TGL, triglycerides. We have conflicting evidence of normal, especially LDL. Nick Norwitz has kind of reiterated that is a question. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's something that's going to have to be addressed in an explainer. So the standard definition of metabolic syndrome doesn't actually even address LDL at all. It's simply high, above the line for HDL and then below a line for triglycerides. LDL is not mentioned in the definition for metabolic syndrome, and I'm going to reflect that in our definition of metabolic health. So in other words, you can be metabolically healthy with a wide range of LDL cholesterol. And we're really focusing on sufficient HDL and lower triglycerides, which we know are addressed by carbohydrate reduction.
Yeah, and I think, you keep going back to, we can and should be able to agree to disagree on certain things. So where there's conflicting evidence, I feel as long as it's good, well done trials or whatever, that people will get, that's our idea, is that people will get presented with both sets and say, currently, this is what's out there, and you need to make your own decision on that, depending on where, depending on your thoughts and your own experience. This guy Ken Hofbauer is asking, will the normal lipids be defined realistically based on how they work in the body?
They'll be defined against the current definition of metabolic syndrome, because that's the working definition that clinicians and researchers are using now. And it's not in opposition to anything that we would think of as metabolically healthy. So again, carbohydrate reduction and consumption of saturated fat raises LDL and lowers triglycerides, which is in alignment with the definition of metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is high triglycerides and low HDL. There's another consideration, which is that the whole triglyceride cholesterol package or criteria doesn't identify people who are not Caucasian, doesn't always identify them as having metabolic syndrome. So some ethnic minorities do not have lipid dysregulation when they do have very high levels of insulin. So these criteria that we've put forward for metabolic health, you don't have to have all 5 of them. All 5 of them would be great, but not everybody's going to have all 5. Those are just what we're aiming for.
It's interesting that you talk about ethnic differences and stuff. Actually, Dr. Vivian Lowe is actually doing a talk after lunch, specifically talking about these differences with different ethnic communities, and that we all need to be very aware of that. So, Jane Jules saying, is there any chance you might influence Kaiser? Right now, they have this blanket advice about eating low fat and high carbs. I don't know. I think I can answer that. It's like we would hope that we would be able to at some point. That's kind of the idea, is that we influence all sectors in some way. That, if we get big enough and strong enough, then we will be able to influence it. But you know what? We need all you people, everybody out there, to be a part of this and contribute and build the size of the community. And with that, we have a voice. If there's only a couple of hundred of us, then it's like Rob Sivers talks about being a grain of sand and you just get blown away. But if you combine all of those grains of sand into a brick, then the wind can't blow you away, right?
Yes, and I would add that in the meantime, if anybody knows anyone in the leadership at Kaiser, we can put together a presentation for them and talk about how you want your employees to have metabolic health, not just avoid illness. You don't want to wait for them to get sick and then do something about it. You want your employees to be healthy.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to have, we've got a couple of committees. We're going to have a bunch of committees, and one of them is going to be an advocacy committee, which is to do exactly stuff like this, to find projects to go out and actually try and change things and make a difference. So Jane, when that committee is put up there, you need to volunteer to be on it, because all of the committees are volunteer, just by the way. How do you explain to patients in simple terms what metabolic health is?
Well, that depends on what other conversations you've been having with them. But if they already have some diagnosed condition, or if they're already on medications, lots of times we see patients or clients when they're at the beginning of metabolic dysregulation. So they have pre-diabetes, they have pre-hypertension, and they want to know how to not have this progress further. And this is where we can really make a difference, because we know from David Unwin's work that over 90% of people with prediabetes can halt the progression and go back to normal levels of blood sugar. And that's how we want to talk to them. We say, do you want to be on medications or do you want this? And when you're talking to your patients about a medication, and there are choices, you can have this medication and it does this, and these are the side effects. You can have this medication and it does this, and these are the side effects. And you have a conversation with your patient about what's going to work best for them. If a medication is taken 4 times a day and they have a busy life, are they likely to miss a dose? Yeah. Okay. So maybe that's not the best option. Maybe a 1 dose a day is a better option, or even an injection or something like that. We have the same conversation with them about lifestyle interventions. And this is where one of the points that I made in the presentation comes up. You rely on your team members, get your nurses, get your dietitians, get these folks, your allied healthcare professionals, get them trained. Doug's got all those programs, get them trained in how to talk to people about therapeutic carbohydrate reduction, how to help them. These people need support. So you can't do it all in a 15-minute clinic visit, but dietitians and nurses may have a lot more flexible time to spend with patients, and health coaches. We need those on board too. I'm going to give a little plug for Diet Doctor here. We're going to have a low-carb nutrition coaching program coming out sometime this year, and it's going to have all kinds of materials for supporting patients and supporting clinicians who are trying to support patients. So we hope to make that easier for you.
Cool. Sue Wolver is asking, and I think you're going to love this one, are you working with national dietitian organizations, as many are still mired in the old dogma and fairly resistant to change?
We're not yet, but that's one of our first targets. We have a very lively group of low carb aligned dietitians that meets regularly. And yeah, our next project is to put together a presentation that explains metabolic health and explains the levels of therapeutic carbohydrate reduction. Right now, for better or for worse, we have this thing called internet keto, or trendy keto. It goes by a lot of names. I call it keto with an extra E, keto. And there's a lot of misconceptions that then dietitians and doctors think, I don't want my patient on that diet. It's got these ridiculous levels of fat, and all you eat is fat. You don't worry about protein, and there's no vegetables. It's your bacon, brie, and burger diet, like Dean Ornish used to say, probably does still say. And we need to change those misconceptions. So yeah, there's a group of dietitians right now working on putting together a core presentation that then we can build out and take to our local dietetics organizations, that we can submit at conferences and things like that. So yeah, we're definitely targeting dietitians, and it's not just because I am one, or maybe it is because I am one, but I think that dietitians really, they're the people who translate science into food. That's how I like to say it. So you health professionals and researchers and doctors can talk all about how great carbohydrate reduction is and what insulin resistance is, but people want to know what's going to be on their plate. And this is what dietitians and nurses, for that matter, do. And health coaches are good at it too. So we can all make an effort to target those audiences and not just doctors, because those are the folks who are going to help people make it real. And those are the folks who are going to help people when they get stuck, when they fall off the wagon, when they have holidays, when they have a particularly vocal friend or relative who says, you're killing yourself. Those are the people who are going to be able to help. And so we need to really support them and target them and educate them and help them see that this is not internet keto. It's a well-supported, evidence-based interventional option. And there's lots of ways to do it, not just one way.
Right. So Mike Woods asked a pretty open-ended question here. He says, how do you think the society should deal with the fact that 50 to 88% of Americans are metabolically unwell? I mean, yeah, that's why we're here.
That's our shoe in, right? So we are not talking to a healthy population, a small segment of which needs our assistance. We're not. We talked to, SMHP talked to Nina Teicholz earlier, or at the end of last year, and she said that they're going to start focusing on the message that the dietary guidelines are for healthy people. Okay, so that's a small segment of the population. That leaves this other 80, 90% for us. And so we want to get them curious. We want them to start to wonder, what is metabolic health and how do I get it? And we'll be the ones who define it. We'll be the ones who provide the tools for understanding what it is. We'll be the ones who provide the tools for getting there. If you're not metabolically healthy, how do you get back to that? How do you regain your metabolic health?
Yeah. So I have an anonymous question asker here saying, would we think about creating a document with the SMHP approved responses to counter common arguments? I think we're already putting together like a sheet for people to take for doctors to hand out, or for people to take to their doctors. I don't know. It sounds like a great idea for something that we could put into the resources at some point.
Yes, and it's very sneaky that they commented as anonymous, because if they hadn't, I would have said, "Oh, great, you can lead this," because this is what we need. Yeah, this is what we need, is that we need volunteers who care about the answers to these questions to help lead them.
Right.
You know, it can't just be one or two people.
Sorry, just when I showed those different committees on the website, at the bottom of, if you remember, okay, at the bottom of each of those committee pages is a form where you can actually sign up and offer volunteer your services for one or all of the different committees. So yeah, I would suggest anonymous, that you even anonymously join one of the committees and come and be a part of these conversations. We have meetings fairly regularly and online, and you know, in the end, you don't have to drive anywhere. It doesn't take that much of your time. And I'm going to keep asking this. I want people to be a part of this. I want people to contribute. I want people to feel like this is their organization and want to be a part of it and want to help build it and want to help make it successful, because that's the only way we're going to build a strong community. So yeah, thank you for that question. Are we using existing definitions like metabolic syndrome, or defining metabolic health de novo?
We are using metabolic syndrome, the definition of metabolic syndrome, as our jumping off point. But as you heard me say in my presentation, it's really, it's not quite enough, because it leaves out a really important factor, which Dr. Ben messaged me about, and I thought it was quite brilliant, which is body composition and body. It really doesn't matter what your lab numbers say if you can't move. And maybe some of us have seen this in our practices or in our personal lives, friends and family members whose, their lab, they don't have chronic disease, their lab work is all fine, but they may not have enough muscle or very weak bones, and going up and down the stairs is a chore and dangerous for them. So we need to include this aspect of vitality in metabolic health. So yes, the definition of metabolic syndrome is our springboard, and we start there. But then we have incorporated, while still trying to keep it simple, some other aspects that we think are really important. For me, sarcopenic obesity is I think it's going to be the next thing that, as our population ages, we're going to stop talking about obesity by itself, but we're going to start talking about sarcopenic obesity, where people are obese and fragile, because these people have a lot of mobility issues. They're just, it's very difficult for them. You can't tell them, oh, lose weight, go out and exercise. They're fragile. So we need to help those people before they get into that state. And so that's why I think incorporating an idea of body composition or physiological health, as well as metabolic health. And I'm sure Dr. Ben, if he hasn't presented already, will tell you how physiological health and metabolic health are closely interconnected, that you can't really take them apart.
Terry Smith-Wright is asking, is there a role for me, an average non-medical, non-nutrition person in the SMHP?
Yes, enthusiastically, yes. We need people with all sorts of talents. When I have people email me and say, you became a nutrition professional later on in your life. Is that what I should do if I want to help? And I tell them, no. You already have talents, you already have skills, you already have experiences that we can use. Graphic designers, writers, editors, warm bodies. Cecile, I know you're out there. She has she's not a healthcare professional, but she has been amazing in terms of organizing us, getting us together, scheduling meetings and make sure that we come to them, getting our materials together. Sometimes we just need people who will participate and give their ideas. For instance, if we're putting together a skeptical doc or skeptical patient handout, wouldn't it be nice to have some skeptical people? Well, how are we going to find them? Well, maybe and you can help us shop this around and get feedback from people who aren't already on the keto bandwagon.
Yeah. Ken Hofbauer says, have you considered a membership for the unwashed masses to contribute on a more modest level than the founding member? And I can answer. The answer to that, Ken, is yes. We didn't know what was going to happen with the thing. We eventually launched it, and it's never going to be perfect when you launch it. And so, but the idea is to put it out there and then see what feedback we get, and then make improvements from there and keep improving. And one of the things that's come back pretty frequently is exactly that question. So we're going to find a non-participating member. We're going to define student membership, and a couple of different ways for people outside of those that are currently able to participate to get in, and especially so that you can become a member, so that you can volunteer for the committee, so you can participate in the discussions, or at least read and follow the discussions, even if you don't have anything to contribute, because I think they're all going to be fascinating discussions as things go on. So yes, Ken, the answer is yes, and we're working on it.
And
yes.
I will add to that yes, we're pushing Doug on this because we feel like we could really use what Cecile calls diet ambassadors, which is people out there who may not be health coaches, or they may not be doctors or nurses or dietitians, but they can still be advocates for metabolic health in the community and steer people towards our resources without, you don't have to be metabolically unhealthy to be an advocate. So just people who are willing to look at the things that we've come up with and, sort of play by the diplomatic rules. We don't need vigilantes. We don't need people to be militant about this. We need to, woo more people with diplomacy and with open arms, and we need help doing that. So yeah, we think ambassadors or advocates type of membership would be a great idea.
Okay, so Anonymous is asking again, how do we know, I think it's the same person, how do we know when SMHP meetings are happening? Is there an invite sent to members? So there's two things here. One is just general meetings. Cecile actually gave me this idea, and I did it back on the 2nd of January. I literally invited all the current founding members to join me for a round table, basically. We got everybody on Zoom, introduced everybody to everybody else, and just talked about what we wanted, why we were excited about it, what we could see. And so I'm hoping to continually have those things, and those all different levels of memberships will get invited to those meetings. As far as the committees go, Cecile is the chair of the steering committee, which coordinates all of these other committees, and she sets up like meetings all day, every day, all day. Meetings all over the place for all the different groups and everything. I don't know how she keeps track of it, but once you're a member at some level, you can volunteer. There's a form where you can volunteer to be, part of one of the committees, and Cecile will get the email and Adele will get the email, and they will then include you. And yes, then you will get calendar invites to join these meetings, and that's how it works. It's as easy as that.
And I will add that if you want to test drive your volunteer work, Cecile has an organization called Metabolic Multipliers, and we think of this as a feeder organization to SMHP. So if you're part of, what did Ken call it, the Great Unwashed, and I'm using his term, not mine. So if you are one of those people who wants to be a diet ambassador or advocate, you can start with Metabolic Multipliers and see how it feels to you, and see if you think we're doing worthwhile things, and see if there's a project that interests you. And then that work feeds into SMHP. And by that time, hopefully, Doug will have some of those ambassador memberships ready. And then you can join as an ambassador and be officially on the website as part of the committee. And all of the pieces will start to fall into place. But Cecile's organization, again, metabolicmultipliers.org, is the place to go. Is what I think of as our feeder organization. It's our playground. It's our sandbox. It's a place where we test out ideas, and then they bubble up to SMHP and the leadership there, and they put their stamp of approval on it, and then it becomes official with the organization. But we would love your participation in that. And don't think of it as a separate organization. Think of it as, like the, oh gosh, my sports analogies are so bad. The farm team. It's the farm team. and then if our ideas and our projects are good, they go up to the big leagues at SMHP.
Okay, cool. So I think this is, Henrik Basson is asking, what do we do about the shops that display all the sweets and cookies, etc., at the pay points? So down the road, that could be a project to try and eliminate stuff like that. But it's like, there's so many shops and so many, like, all over the world. I mean, what do you got to maybe take your shop like on your corner store. But like Mark Cucuzzello, who's talking later in the weekend, he has basically worked to eliminate all sugar and sugary drinks and everything from his hospital. It's a fairly small hospital, but he took on that project and he's got it done. It's not all hospitals in the country, but he's done it in his hospital. So I think if find something that's dear to your heart or close by that you shop at all the time, and maybe go and talk to them. I think one of the other really cool things, Jody Nishida is a PharmD in Hawaii, and she's managed to get in with a 7-Eleven, and she has every 7-Eleven in Hawaii has a keto corner or keto section, and not only that, but she has to approve every item that's in there to make sure that, because we get that all the time in checkouts all over the country now. There's keto product and it's a lot of rubbish. So she vets that. That's another way. You might not get rid of the other stuff at the checkout, but at least there's a place where people can go where they can get what they know is a vetted keto option. So there's a bunch of different things, but it's on all of us, Hendrik, to champion this and to take it on. Take on a project yourself in your community, and come and join these committees, and you can talk about it there. Maybe get ideas to strategize how people will help you to fight the fight. But we need to all fight the fight. That's what I'm really hoping for.
Yes, I second everything Doug said.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So is there not a conflict between the insurance industry saving money and big pharma losing money? Uh,
Probably, but one of the places that we're going to target are the reinsurance companies. And that's where so these are the people who carry the extra risk from insurance companies setting up these programs with pharma. So the reinsurance companies are buying that extra risk. So it's in their best interest to actually see the number of people who have diabetes and are on diabetes medications go down. It's in their best interest to see the people on blood pressure medication go down. So when we get our feet underneath us and we get a little momentum, that's going to be one of our fundraising areas, is to go and connect with these reinsurance companies and sell them on the idea that if they support our work, it will be good for their bottom line in the long run.
yeah, and big pharma is losing money. Good. Um, I, I think that's one of our biggest problems, is that big pharma is where so much of the resistance is coming from, because if we are successful, then they're going to lose money. So yeah, I suppose in a way that is, we're in conflict with big pharma in a way, but we're trying to do everything. That's the whole thing about what I love about the way Adele's going about this is trying to be as non-confrontational as possible. We want to have as little. We don't want to be constantly in conflict. We want to basically present an option to people that if they want to come and join and be a part of it, then cool. But we're not telling anybody else they're wrong and that they must stop doing what they're doing or whatever. If you want to learn what we're doing, then come and check it out. And hopefully that way we can not end up in constant wars, which is destructive. It doesn't actually achieve anything. And we don't get anything done that way. We just spend our time fighting the fight instead of doing work. So I'm hoping that we can stay out of those conflicts as much as possible.
Right. And if we force the hand of the pharmaceutical companies and make them say that they are opposed to metabolic health, then that's good. That's good for us. That's good optics for us. And that's what they'll have to end up doing. And remember too that although chronic diseases are huge, huge moneymakers for pharma, there are lots of other illnesses that aren't going to be treated by diet and lifestyle.
Right.
And they, that's where their attention should be. That's where their attention should have always been. So we are simply providing, somebody said this in our town hall, and I wish I could give this person credit because I thought it was brilliant. We're providing the medical intervention information that should have been provided all along. But the dietary guidelines got in there and said, oh, carbs are so wonderful and fat is so evil. So that information got ignored, and it didn't get taught to dietitians or to doctors or anybody. And so we're just providing that information. We're just providing a way for people to not take medications if they don't want to, but with also the understanding that sometimes medication is what is necessary, and sometimes it's the patient's choice. So just because we believe that diet and lifestyle should fix everything and you shouldn't have to take medications, I speak as someone who's been on a low carb diet for years and years, who has migraines, and every now and then I still get a migraine, and when I get one, I am very happy that pharma has provided good medications for my migraines. So it would be wonderful. It would be a wonderful world if we could fix everything, every single little thing with diet and lifestyle, but we can't. And so we want to provide the options for people who don't want those medications.
That's cool. Thanks so much for being a part of it. Thanks for inspiring me to kind of put this all together, because without you, this would never have happened. Just a few things down, metabolicpractitioners.org. I encourage you all to go and have a look at their website. Go and read all about it. Read about the accreditation pathways. Read about the stuff that we're doing. And then, start writing to us. And if we have some ideas, and most importantly, join. If you're a practitioner, it's free to put your information in there. At least do that. And then as you learn more, you'll start to see the value in being a member, and at some point you may decide you want to join and be a member. But at the very least, put your name in there and add to our practitioner list. It's grown substantially in the last couple of weeks, and we hope that it will keep growing at that rate, which is very cool. And especially if you're from other countries outside of the US, we need to grow those communities as well.